Good evening. Welcome. It's great to see everybody on a warm Texas afternoon. I appreciate you all taking the time to come out. I'm not surprised in the slightest that you came out for this program, so welcome very much. I'm Steve Slick. I'm the director of the Intelligence Studies Project here at the university. My job at this point is relatively simple. I just want to thank the people that deserve to be thanked, and those include the Clements Center for National Security, the Strauss Center, the LBJ School of Public Affairs, and in particular, I'd like to thank a friend of the school, Livingston Cosberg, who actually took the initiative and reached out to General Yadlin, invited him to Texas, and we're happy to take advantage of his presence here this evening. Let me give you a very quick overview of what we're going to do and what you should expect. So I'm going to call on one of our terrific Brumley Fellows here in just a minute to do the introduction. General Yadlin's going to come up here, and he's going to deliver some remarks based more or less on some PowerPoint slides. And then when he finishes up, I'm going to join him. We're going to do a little bit of Q&A back and forth, interview style. And after that, we'll do our best to save some time for questions from you all. So think about that. And when we do that, we'll have microphones coming up and down the aisles. So look for them before you raise your hand to ask a question. So with that, Nathan, over to you.
Good evening. My name is Nathan Bamagni. I'm a second-year graduate student here at the LBJ School, studying global policy, working towards interested in national security, law, and diplomacy. I'm also a Brumley Fellow, as Professor Slick mentioned. It's a great program, interdisciplinary, where folks across campus have the opportunity to study and research whatever you'd like, as long as it's related to international affairs. It's an honor to have Major General Amos Yadlin with us tonight for what promises to be a fascinating discussion. General Yadlin is currently the director of the Institute for National Security Studies, Israel's leading strategic think tank located in Tel Aviv. He has over 4 decades of service in the Israeli Defense Forces. His accomplishments are too many to name here, but I'll name a few. He served on the General Staff as the Chief of Defense Intelligence, and as the Deputy Commander of the Israeli Air Force. As a fighter pilot, General Yadlin participated in the 1981 Osirak airstrike that destroyed Iraq's nuclear reactor. General Yadlin is no stranger to the United States and holds a master's degree in public administration from Harvard University, and later served in the IDF as attaché to the United States. With that, I'd like to invite General Yadlin to the podium. Please join me in welcoming General Yadlin.
Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm really pleased to be here in Texas. I feel like home. I was grown up in a kibbutz in the Negev with 95 degrees as the minimum during most of the year, with no air condition at that time. So I really feel at home. When I was introduced, they say that I served 40 years. As a matter of fact, 40 years and 9 months. And in Israel, it's a long serving time. Usually our generals are at the age of, they are serving 25, 30 years and gone. So before retirement, I got a small note from the chief of personnel, say, Amos, you are the only general who crossed the 40 years line. And since 1948, since the IDF was founded. I gave him some names. I say I don't think that I'm the only one. He came back, 39, 39 and a half, 30, nobody crossed 40. So at Shabbat dinner with my kids, I told them about the fact. And then my little boy, who is not so little, he's 30 years old and also a captain in the IDF, say, "Why, Dad, why you are so proud? They have promoted you very slowly." So slowly promoted with 6 positions as general. I was really enjoying flying airplanes, which was my profession and my hobby in the same time. so I don't have to fly in the weekends with small airplanes. And then they put me near a desk to fly at the most dangerous desk in Israel, which is the head of intelligence. I don't know how it is in America, but in Israel, if something goes wrong, it's an intelligence failure. If something succeeds, it's a policy success or operational success. So every day I walk to my office, I look at my predecessor's picture, as in a military office, you usually see your predecessors, and 50% of them never finish the term of intelligence failure, because of intelligence failure. I had another tough job. I have 3 bosses. The chief of staff, which I used to be is J2, the defense minister, head of DIA, another hat, and the prime minister as the national intelligence assessor. So if I have one advice for you this afternoon, never work for 3 bosses in the same time. In Israel, they don't like each other. So in every meeting, the 3 of them want you, the professional, with the uniform, with the wing, to be in their position. And you can't make the 3 of them happy. So from every meeting, you go out with 2 of them upset from you, and 1 is unthankful. Anyway, the only way to survive, and I have survived 5 years, was to tell them, this is my last job, I don't want any promotion from you. And second, try to give them the answer according to my professional judgment. And I don't care what they think. And they got used to it. After a year, they got used to it. So I want to start and speak about the Middle East for 5 minutes, because this was the title of the meeting. And then I will go to Israel perspective. We one day will have a new government. We already did 1 election in the spring, 2nd election a week ago. I think the prime minister is looking now for a 3rd election. And at the end, there will be a cabinet. And the cabinet need to look at very difficult national security issues. But before that, the Middle East. The Middle East is today in a state of tectonic movement. There is no one idea that people look for as it used to be. Could be socialism, communism, or capitalism and liberalism. This is not the case in the Middle East. There are many, many ideas, they fighting each other. There are many, many religions that fighting each other. There are many, many sects that fighting each other. There are social tensions, rich and poor. There are all kinds of political ideas how to solve the problem, and nobody is solving it. The Middle East was left behind. We have started on the same place like East Asia or South America. They are here, and the Middle East, very low position. We have wars all over. Libya, Syria, Yemen, Egypt is unstable, Israel and Iran, Saudi Arabia and Iran. The price of oil take the economy down almost everywhere. They haven't developed economies that will substitute the economy of oil. And the Middle East is unstable. The Arab Spring gave a lot of hopes that hold maybe 6 months. And in the last 8 years, we don't see an Arab Spring. We see an Arab summer. And the Middle East is a place that the hope is not there. In the past, they used to blame everything on the Israeli-Palestinian issue. One day, when I was chief of intelligence, I met a Marine general, General Jim Jones. At that time, he was the first national security advisor for President Obama. And he also believed, like many American generals that served in Saudi Arabia and other places, that if you solve the Israeli-Palestinian issue, you solve the rest of the problem in the Middle East. I thought differently. But he said, if I have to advise my president about a meeting with Almighty, and the president has one wish, I wish he will solve the Israeli-Palestinian issue. And I said, you know, General, I respect this wish. It's very important to me as well. It's my kids that are serving now. It's a conflict that should be resolved. However, please explain me how it will solve the rest of the problem. Is Afghanistan will be solved if the miracle will happen? Is Iran nuclear ambitions and hegemony ambitions will be solved if the Israeli-Palestinian issue will be solved? Is the civil war in Syria will be different, in Libya, in Yemen, in Somalia, everywhere? I have a better idea. If your president go to meet Almighty, give him a wish to change the regime in Iran. It will be much more easy for your forces in Iraq, in Afghanistan. The Israeli-Palestinian issue can be solved if Iran will not be the spoiler, and many other issues. So he was a tough guy. You cannot convince him easily. We discussed the issue for 2 hours. At the end, we decided that the president will go to Almighty with 2 wishes. So look at Syria as an example to the Middle East today. Civil war that have killed 500,000 people. 500,000 people. 90% of them by the regime and its allies, Hezbollah, Iran, and Russia, and 10% by the opposition and the ISIS and the terrorists. The war caused 1 out of 2 Syrians are not living in the same home that they lived before the war. There are 6 million refugees out of Syria, making huge problems in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Turkey, and the Turks are holding them from going to Europe. And there are another 4 million that are displaced within Syria. The price of bringing Syria back to the pre-civil war position, and this is 10 years from now, they are lagging behind, is between $300 billion to 350. This is a huge amount that nobody wants to invest in Syria, because the Europeans have their own problems. The Americans want Assad to go as a condition to invest in Syria. And in a way, they are happy that he is not going, and they don't have to take it on their responsibility. The Russians are bankrupt, and the Chinese are smart. Syria is not a place to invest. So Syria gonna be a huge problem for many, many, many years. You see in Syria 3 wars. The civil war between Assad and his ally, which are the minorities in Syria, and the Sunni opposition. But you see a proxy war that regional superpowers are in Syria. It used to be Saudi and Qatar. They are now withdrawing. It's Iran. It's Turkey with the Kurdish issue that add more complexity to the issue. And you see Americans and Russians. And the trend is very clear. America is disengaging, and Russia came to Syria big time. Because Russia decided that this is an opportunity to make Russia great again. I met a Russian colleague, head of GRU. He also retired. And in a dinner over a little bit of vodka, he said the following: Amos, tell your American friends, it is over. They took Egypt from us 40 years ago. They took Iraq for us 10 years ago. They took Libya for us 3 years ago. Syria is going to be the turning point. And exactly, it was 2014, and in 2015, Putin have sent not many, 2 squadrons, 3,000 advisors and special forces, police, military police, and Putin can check all the boxes. Make Russia great again, show the allies that unlike the Americans, we are not pushing them under the bus, experiment the new weapons that the Russians developed in the last 10 years, have bases, air bases and navy bases in the Mediterranean, an old Russian dream, save Assad and fight ISIS. By the way, this is the order. They haven't fought ISIS so much. They left it to your forces. So we have Russia, sometimes in the sky of Syria, in the same day. You see American airplanes, Russian airplanes, Turkish airplanes, Israeli airplanes, and Syrian airplanes. So this is one example of the Middle East today. The only surprise I have is that the borders that were drawn on the sand 102 years ago by 2 gentlemen, Brits and French, Sykes and Picot, that were against national and tribal borders. They were borders on the sand. They still keeping the nationalities of the Syrians and the Iraqis in a way that's impressive to me. Even though some of them Shia, some of them Sunni, some of them want to go to the 6th century to have Sharia law, some of them want to be modern. It's really, really surprising that the borders are still holding, and none of the states formally disintegrate, even though there are some independent, autonomous areas. So, last and not least, take the 5 regional superpowers in the Middle East. And Middle East used to be identical to the Arab nation. If you look at the 5 superpowers today, they are hardly Arabs. It's Iran, it's Turkey, it's Israel, Saudi Arabia, if you called it a superpower, I'm not sure, and Egypt. The 2 Arab countries are in a big trouble. And Syria disappeared at all. So, tough neighborhood. And Israel is there with our problems. However, we were able to, from defense point of view, to secure our borders in a way that enable Israel to be an island of modernism, democracy, good economy, and we are there knowing that we are very strong and powerful, but knowing that there is huge challenges ahead of us. And this is what I want to discuss in the next 10 minutes, and then Steve will cross me with some other questions. So, assuming we have a government, there are 4 military problems out of 5. The 5th is not so military. We'll see it in a minute. But there is interesting inversion between the importance and the immediacy. The most fragile, explosive front is Gaza. But Hamas, easy to defeat. Militarily, it's not a problem. It's a political problem. We don't want to reoccupy Gaza. So 2 million Palestinians, in a way, are not under our control due to the disengagement in 2005, and we don't have any desire to go back there. But Hamas is easy to defeat if at the end of the day they will decide to go to war. Iranians in Syria, Iranians came to Syria after they won the civil war with forces that are not intended to fight opposition, forces that they built against Israel. However, they've made a mistake. They came to the wrong arena. Israel enjoys intelligence superiority and air superiority in Syria, and the Iranians until now were unable to cope with Israel. It's more difficult than Hamas. It has the potential of escalation, but it's a reasonable threat that we can handle. Next is Hezbollah. Hezbollah well deterred since 2006. However, they have built their forces, more than 10,000 rockets and missiles, and some of better weapons that they got from Iran. And if a war will erupt in the northern border, this is serious. It's not tomorrow, like in Gaza. In Gaza, one rocket or mortar bomb that hit the wrong kindergarten, and we are in a war. This is not the case with Hezbollah. And the most defense issue, the number one, is Iran nuclear issue. However, it is not going to be tomorrow that we will have to terminate another nuclear program in the Middle East. There is a national security issue which deals with the peace process with the Palestinians. This was frozen since Kerry failed in 2014. The president of the United States promising to publish the deal of the century. They're working on that for 2.5 years. And we all waiting for it to be published very soon after the government will be formed. Iran nuclear program. I think the important development was 2018. The US withdrew from the JCPOA. This was May 2018, and exercised maximum pressure on Iran, hoping that Iran willing to negotiate a better deal, not for Iran, for the P5+1. And the Iranians basically decided to have a strategy of strategic patience. They haven't believed that the sanctions will be effective because it's unilateral American sanctions. And they hope that with the help of Europe and Russia and China, they will survive. And they have patience. And they look for 2020 when there will be another president that will go back to the JCPOA. This was the Iranian decision back in 2018. When the president ended the oil waivers, and after a year of sanctions, they understood that the sanctions are very painful and the Iranian economy is in big trouble. So then they move to a different approach, active strategic patience, which means we will make the American pay for their policy. We will inflict cost on them. And the US, you don't have to be the head of the Iranian intelligence to know what the US want, because the president is tweeting what he thinks. This is a dream of intelligence officer, that the leader of the other country will tweet what he thinks. So they know that America wants to go to negotiation. What are the scenarios in front of us? One scenario, and this is, was the dream of Prime Minister Netanyahu and John Bolton, that the regime will collapse. As an analyst, I don't see the regime collapse. We don't have time to speak about it. Just think about Cuba, how they survived for 60 years. So the Iranians are under sanctions in the last 40 years. They know how to handle it. They are suffering. They want to remove the sanctions, but they are not going to collapse. The internal security apparatus of the regime is still very, very strong. The only hope is that we are not good in predicting regime collapse. We were not good when the Soviet Union collapsed. We were not good when the Egyptian President Mubarak was removed. But all the analysts, after they taking all the parameters, saying the regime is still very strong. Another scenario is a new negotiation, JCPOA 2.0. And the last one, the Iranians are not coming to negotiate because they have preconditions. They want the president to remove the sanctions before negotiation. I don't see him doing that. So the Iranians can go forward. So here is a chart from the Iranian planning group. I basically had these slides exactly in May, after the president haven't extended the waivers on oil export. Say the Iranians looking at 3 areas, nuclear, terror, and oil. And they want to say to the Americans, to signal them, we have power to create some damage to your interest. If nobody will export oil, if we are not exporting oil, nobody will export oil. If you are leaving the JCPOA, we can leave the JCPOA. We can even go higher. We can leave the NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty. We can even go higher. We can develop a bomb. We saw how politely you deal with Kim. Maybe it's a good idea. So the Iranians are very cautious. By the way, never underestimate the Iranians. Smart people, educated, sophisticated. There are more ministers with PhD in the Iranian government than in your government or our government. And these people invented the chess, so they know something about strategy, and they are doing excellent carpet, so means they know something about tactics and details. So the Iranians are trying to signaling and maybe to demonstrate that they have the capability to destroy some American interest and Saudi interest and Israeli interest. And it's a brinkmanship. There is a phenomena in the Middle East, maybe globally, that nobody wants to go to war. Not Israel and Hamas, not Israel and Iran, not the US and Iran, not the US and China. Everybody knows that the war in the 21st century basically brings you a very small benefit, and the cost is huge. Since both sides know that going to war is not a good idea, both of them are playing under what they estimate is the escalation point, in a place that they don't want to reach, that the other side must go to war. This is brinkmanship, a real classic brinkmanship. So this I put in May 2019. I didn't predict the attack on Saudi Arabia, which higher than the line, I think, and I didn't predicted that they will down an American Global Hawk, which is not a drone. It's a huge Boeing size reconnaissance airplane, $200 million, and there are not many of them, on international water with taking responsibility. Because one of the phenomena that they have learned that if you don't claim responsibility, the chances for retaliation are lower. By the way, they have learned it from Israel. Second, precision project. This is Iranian project to take the 100,000 rocket and missiles that today are statistical weapon. They don't really hit a pinpoint Israeli Air Force base with airplanes or intelligence antenna or the Kiryat in Tel Aviv, which is where the headquarters of IDF, or a power station. Today, the inaccurate rockets are a terror weapon, but not really significant militarily. Psychologically, yes, but not militarily. The Iranians come to the idea that their weapon must be much more precise. And they are developing a project, they started in Syria, to upgrade the ballistic missiles and the rockets to a GPS accuracy, 5 to 10 meters. This is a real challenge for Israel. And the guy in the left lower part of the slide, name is Begin, the Prime Minister of Israel in 1981. He developed the Begin Doctrine, that basically saying that if one of the dictators in the neighborhood that called to the destruction of Israel is developing a nuclear capability, Israel will preempt. And he done it in 81 in Baghdad, and then Olmert have done it in 2007 vis-a-vis the North Korean reactor in Syria. The question for the next cabinet of Israel, whether this precision project can be under or should be under the Begin Doctrine. Very crucial question. By the way, this is a satellite image of the Iranian capability to hit precisely. Look at the left side of the slide. Every tank, every refinery got the cruise missile from Iran in the middle of the target. This is a serious capability, a serious capability. Look at that, the same place everywhere. By the way, coming from the north, the idea that it's come from Yemen is in Iranian propaganda. The Iranians started their entrenchment in Syria. As I say, Israel won this round against the Iranian entrenchment in 2018. When I saw the Prime Minister lately, I say, yes, we won this round, but remember, it's like the NBA championship. It's 7 games. You won only the first one. And the Iranians are now moving. They're moving to Iraq, they're moving to Lebanon, which are much more difficult arena for Israel. I think I will stop here because I see Steve starting to be nervous. Gaza is another issue. Once again, I say Israel don't want to go to Gaza. On the other hand, we have to secure our people. So there is tensions here. There is tensions between the need to attack Hamas, but you want to keep the southern of Israel safe. You don't want to empower Hamas if you keep the ceasefire because they bring more and more weapons. You don't want to have contribute to the humanitarian crisis that's already in Gaza by attacking them more. So they have to take decision because Hamas understands that Israel don't want to go to war. And this will be the last slide. It's interesting how you move from situation to situation. War on the right-hand side of the slide, nobody want to be there. So the Hamas choose to have border protests, fire balloons, fire explosive on a very low level that will not escalate. But at the end of the day, it's escalate. So there is a limited military operation for a day or two. The Egyptians or the UN are coming and close it for a ceasefire, but no condition to the ceasefire. And every side understand a different condition. So they move again to the right-hand side. If they try to have some kind of long-range agreement, the Hamas demands are unacceptable. So they are now working on the orange side, maybe to have some limited political arrangement with Hamas, but you need a new government for that. Okay, I stop here.
Thank you. It's terrific. Thank you very much, General Yadlin. Those were terrific remarks. I think I want to follow up on several of those issues and may complete your briefing for you here. First, let me add my welcome. It's great to see you here in Austin, Texas, at the LBJ School of Public Affairs. Let me also thank you for the time you spent upstairs with our intelligence and national security policymaking students. It was an absolutely terrific session, and I sincerely appreciate your commitment to education and training. I suspect you might have inherited that from your father, right? Who was the Minister of Education in Israel, for those of you who
In
don't.
Rabin first administration, 1974 to 77.
So you came by your interest in education and academics, honestly.
Then he went back to his kibbutz and served in the dining room
That sounds attractive.
before becoming a simple teacher again.
Yeah, that's terrific. By way of full disclosure, before we get too deeply into this, I should acknowledge that General Yadlin and I didn't meet today for the first time. We know each other. It was my privilege to work with General Yadlin when I was serving at the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv earlier this decade. And if I recall those engagements correctly, we didn't agree all the time, on the details, but we did both have a deep and sincere commitment to the bilateral security relationship between the United States and Israel. And I've said it before, and I'll say it for this group. We can debate it if you'd like. I think America's citizens and Israel's citizens, frankly, are safer every day because of the cooperation that takes place between our two intelligence communities. And Amos is a terrific ambassador for that. Although I probably should have been paying closer attention to that relationship, because when I was looking through some of the materials I have here, I remember when Amos was retiring from his job as Director of Military Intelligence, 2012, I believe, he gave me this terrific book, Raid on the Sun. You've heard several times today references to Amos's participation in the 1981 Osiris attack, and this is a terrific book that you gave me on that. But inscribed within it was a card that includes a quote from President Dwight Eisenhower. It says, "Leadership is the art of getting someone else to do something you want done because he wants to do it." So I guess I should have been paying closer attention. You mentioned a couple of times.
That's what I wrote?
That's from you, yeah.
Okay.
Denies everything.
I agree.
It denies everything. Yeah, so you mentioned the election, and you raised some of the security challenges facing Israel. I think our talk will probably focus a little bit more on what you see as some of the solutions to these problems. Maybe we can define them a little more completely, but then I'd like to hear your view on what this putative new Israeli government is going to do when they take office. So we don't know who's going to be the next prime minister, what the shape of the new government's going to be, but it does look like the sort of predominance of Prime Minister Netanyahu over Israeli security policy is over or coming to an end. So if you grant that as a presumption, in what areas do you anticipate there'll be greater flexibility with a government, any new government, that's not a Netanyahu-led government? Because there is history over a decade or more on all of these security problems. Some, I suspect, there could be some movement, some discussion, some openness, some flexibility. Others, maybe there's continuity. So how would you do that? How would you think about that?
Yeah, let me tell you a secret. The election in Israel were not on these issues. On these issues are basically a consensus in Israel. Iran nuclear program, a problem. You should deal with it. Hezbollah is the main threat with the precision project. It's going from right to left with consensus. The Iranians' entrenchment in Syria, the same. Hamas, even going to Gaza. Let me tell you another secret. Not left was left in Israel. It's the right and the center. That's it. The three generals who are leading blue and white, all of them used to serve under Bibi. General Yadlin was his defense minister, and Gantz and Ashkenazi were the chief of staff. The elections in Israel were only on the personality called Bibi Netanyahu. The right basically saying he is indispensable. He is a leader of different league. He can pick the phone, talk to Trump, to Putin, to Xi. Nobody can replace him. And the center left that was left, center basically saying enough is enough. You are corrupt. You have 3 indictments subject to hearing against you. It is time that you will exercise your admiration to the American system. 8 years. Thank you very much. We'll build a library in your hometown, and you're gone. And the election basically will not change the need. The problem is that there is no discussion in Israel. Because since elections were called at the end of last year, everybody wait for the election and then to create a coalition and then to second election. So we lost a year of serious discussion. We are all campaigning, which is not serious strategic decision taking. There is one area that could be a change, and this is the Israeli-Palestinian issue. Because Prime Minister Netanyahu basically decided that there is no partner, and he enjoyed the fact that the Palestinians are divided to 2 political entities, and he enjoyed the fact that since 2016, there is a very friendly president in the White House that basically buy the Israeli narrative and not the Palestinian narrative as the main argument. So if there will be a change and the president plan will be in a place that the prime minister from the right cannot be there, but it will be a plan that the center of Israel can be there, and the Arabs, Sisi and MBS and NBZ, can be in the same place, because the Palestinians are somewhere there. But if America and the center of Israel and the Arabs will agree on a plan, then you can move forward and hope that the Palestinians will join or will be brought by the Arabs. I think the chances, even with a different government, are not that high. Not that high. And the INSS, my institute recommendation is, even if they are not coming, if you want to have Israel as a democratic, Jewish, secure, and with a moral upper hand, you should shape your borders in an independent way, coordinated with the Arabs, coordinated with the international community. Don't wait to the Palestinians. Because here's the paradox. Both the Israeli right wing and the Palestinians are now causing us to go to a one state, which is, in my mind, big mistake. And I think if there will be another prime minister, like General Gantz, he fully understands it. And he will have to decide how we try to make it an agreed agreement, but if not, and let's do it ourselves. And basically, when I present my plan, I'm saying, I guess all of you know the Israeli application called Waze. So Waze, first of all, you dial your destination. And my destination is a 2-state solution where Israel is Jewish, democratic, secure, and with the moral upper hand. This is where I want to go. The main road is agreement. Unfortunately, the Palestinians proved again and again that they cannot reach an agreement. I would try again. But if the road is closed, jammed, maybe the bridge failed, I'm not giving up. Let's take alternative road, which is interim agreement, which is regional agreement. And if none of them working, take independent road and do it according to what you think that is right. Last time I spoke with the Prime Minister, I say, because General John's idea, I found it attractive. Say, assume you have a meeting with Almighty. And you will ask Almighty to make Israel 50 years from now in your parameters. Geographically, demographically, security-wise, and morally-wise. what will be the parameters that you will ask him? You can ask for everything. You cannot ask him to remove the Palestinians. They are there. Even God cannot take them from there. Unfortunately, I cannot arrange the meeting, but you are strong. You have a window of opportunity. Israel was never so strong. Israel never has such a friendly administration. Israel has friends in the Arab world. You know, I see Saudis and Emiratis and people from the Sunni Arab world. I see them not in Riyadh and not in Tel Aviv, but nice places like Paris and London. And the main song they are singing is the following. We haven't become Zionists. However, you are not our enemy anymore. We are not afraid of you. You don't want to kill us. We have only one enemy. This is Iran. Iran want to kill us. Iran want to destroy our oil industries. They want to take the two holy cities. And America is disengaging. So you are the only ally here. So it's a window of opportunity for an Israeli leader to shape the future of Israel. And my main argument against the prime minister, you enjoying the status quo in the long run, mistake.
Yeah, thank you for that. In my notes, I did want to talk to you about the Palestinian issues.
I knew that you will, so I preempt you.
These are among the things we argued about. In your report, you and several colleagues from your institute last fall, I think it was, did issue this report that you were careful to describe not as a peace plan, but rather as a formula for separation of the Israelis from the Palestinians.
I hate the root separation. It's disengagement, and it's shaping the borders of Israel according to the characters we want Israel to be.
Yeah.
Okay?
No, that's right. And you described those as well, again, here tonight. Jewish, democratic, secure, ethical. You referred to the moral standing. And you also described a binational state as, along with Iran, principal existential threat to the state of Israel. I just want to, as you would as a good intelligence officer, put yourself in the shoes of the Palestinian leadership, particularly the West Bank. Your plan excludes Gaza. What would this look like to you? And how would you react to this if these steps that you outlined for Israel to shape its borders, maintain security access, and act unilaterally rather than in a negotiated fashion to stabilize the issue? How do you see their perspective on this, and where's that likely to lead? Is this something that they passively accept while you take advantage of these attractive conditions that exist today for Israeli policymakers? Because I'm sure you've gone through that exercise.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I have to tell them that they have missed every opportunity. And it's time for them to stop miss every opportunity. They haven't missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. So in 2000, Barak gave them an offer that they rejected. And it's ended with a bloody intifada, 5 years that were very difficult for Israel and for the Palestinians. Finally, they understood in Ramallah that terror brings them nowhere, but they haven't got a better proposal from the Olmert government, which in Annapolis gave them more than Barak gave them. Barak gave them 92%, and Olmert gave them 100% of the West Bank, and they refused. And then Kerry came with another framework for 2014. And you know, Bibi was smart enough to say, I don't like your plan, but I accept it with reservations. Abu Mazen never answered to this day. So they have to decide what they want. And my plan giving them the hope that the two-state solution is still there when there will be a different leadership on both sides of the border, and when they will change their mind. Because if the miracle will happen, and tomorrow we will transfer the brain of late President Peres to Netanyahu, and he will go to Ramallah and will make peace, what do we get? Another Arab failed state that very soon will fall to the hands of Hamas or ISIS. This is not a good idea. That's why security is there. For Prime Minister Netanyahu, security is an excuse. For me, it's a prerequisite to achieve the other. But I'm insisting on security. So I think what they are getting in my plan, first of all, stopping the settlement, which was a demand of the administration you serve. So they know that time is not taking away more and more Palestinian territories.
But the annexation of contiguous settlements near Jerusalem.
I am drawing a line between the blocks that will be Israel in any plan, accepted by the Palestinians, swaps. So I'm drawing a line, and whatever is in the blocks, I will continue to develop. It's 500,000 people. I cannot remove them anywhere. But those who are beyond this line, and Prime Minister Netanyahu refused to draw this line, and I'm drawing it. I think the Palestinians should be happy about it. Then I give them a huge boost to build their institution and their economy and their nation to be able to take over without being another failed state. It's not a miracle that the Palestinians are not starting another intifada. They look around in Syria, in Libya, in Iraq. They see what's the meaning of another intifada, and they say, you know, with all the problems of occupation, maybe we will fight Israel in the UN, we will create a BDS movement, but going to another violent move, not so much, not so quickly.
Okay, well, thank you for explaining that. Back to Iran. We can't have a security discussion without talking about Iran. You helpfully explained the Precision Project, the movement of more precise, more accurate weapons closer to Israel's borders, and the campaign between wars, Israel's efforts to combat all this. My question for you on Iran is concerning the nuclear program, right? And it's more of an intelligence policy question, to be honest with you. We discussed upstairs a little bit the ethos that pervades U.S. intelligence, right? That strictly separates the information providing, informing function of our intelligence agencies from the policy making and the decision making function. We believe that those two should never meet and that they're discrete functions. And my question arises from this article earlier this month, actually, from the New York Times Magazine, that described in great details the last 8 or 10 years of diplomacy between the U.S. and Israel over what to do about Iran. And the principal concern that at some point during this progression, there would be a surprise attack by Israel on Iran's nuclear facilities. And you described previous efforts, the Begin Doctrine itself, 1981 in Iraq, 2007 in Al-Kibar in Syria. And the interesting intelligence policy aspect in that story that the New York Times told was that at a certain point, the intelligence chiefs of the Israeli services, or some subset of them, and military commanders made a decision that they were going to attempt to oppose or at least restrict the options that Prime Minister Netanyahu had if he wished to conduct that airstrike. And my question for you is, reflecting on that period, I know you've thought about it a lot, you've talked about it a lot, you've lived through it, right? What is the lesson for historians, for students, for Israel's future security leaders, where we have this vitally important existential threat, Prime Minister attempting to deal with it, whether he had a good plan or the wrong approach for dealing with it, and having his security service chiefs sort of unite to oppose him and prevent that option from being available to him. Can you reflect on that a little bit?
Yeah, I haven't read the New York Times, especially when they write about Israel. So I don't know what you are talking about. but I know exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wonder why somebody wants to be the Prime Minister of Israel. Because there is a fork here, and you stand and you have to choose between two grave alternatives, both of them. I call it the bomb or the bombing dilemma. If you do nothing, they will have the bomb. If you bomb them, you may have war. And some people will say, after that, they will have the bomb. So it's a huge dilemma. For Prime Minister Netanyahu, when he stands here, the bomb or the bombing, take him 10 seconds to decide bombing. So he sees himself as Winston Churchill of the Jewish people. He warned against Iran that nobody believed, like Churchill against the Nazis, and he will win this war as Churchill won the Second World War. For me, as Chief of Intelligence, I told the Prime Minister, I thought about it not 10 seconds. I thought about it 3 years, with all the considerations. But my judgment is that if we are here, yes, bombing is preferable to have a bomb in the hands of Ayatollahs that call to destroy Israel. However, my judgment was that we are not here yet. There are strategies that we still have. Remember, it was 2009 when he came on board. Say, we haven't tried agreement. Agreement, if the agreement stops them, why being in this dilemma? We haven't tried sanctions. At that time, Obama was against sanctions because he believed in agreement. Bibi was against sanctions because he believed in attack Iran. Thanks God, the US Congress and the Europeans pushed Obama to sanctions, and sanctions were very effective. So agreement, sanctions, cyber war, before you send the airplanes. All kind of, I called it C in a power of 3. Covert, clandestine power, cyber. If you can exercise this option, it's good. Regime change. Say, you haven't tried all of this. When all of this will be exhausted, I'm with you. There is no any hesitation in the head of any military or intelligence director or commander in Israel who at the end making the decision. The political echelon is our bosses, and they will decide. But it's our professional duty to tell them that we think that the decision is wrong. But if they will decide, we'll go and do it. Or you have another option, to resign. But the idea that they force them not to decide about it is wrong. If this is what is written in the New York Times, it's wrong. At the end of the day, it was Bibi Netanyahu and Ehud Barak as defense minister that decided not to attack. It was not the security head of the intelligence or the chief of staff. The chief of staff said, I'm against it. I think we haven't tried everything. The consequences will be such and such. But if you decide, I'm ready. This is the right story.
Okay, thank you for that. An immediate, practical dilemma that confronts the U.S. leadership and the leadership in Riyadh today is what to do about those attacks that you added to your slide. So 2 weeks ago in the eastern province, there were cruise missile and apparently drone attacks. Western governments and our own government has claimed that Iran was the point of origin, or at least behind the attacks, even if they left from somebody else's territory. They did severe damage, demonstrated vulnerability, shortcomings in air defenses. My question for you is, again, as an intelligence officer, putting yourself in the Iranian shoes, how should we understand this? This appears to be an escalation, comes on the heels of the shoot down of the Global Hawk over international airspace in the Persian Gulf. They appear to be less concerned about a direct military conflict with the U.S. Now, you can't have a discussion with an Israeli security figure without talking about deterrence, right? The need to establish it, the need to maintain it. When you lose it, the need to restore it, right? I learned this in 4 years. What should the people in Washington who are responsible for these decisions and their allies in Riyadh who actually suffered the harm, what's an appropriate response that would reestablish deterrence with respect to the Iranians and it seems to me, step off this apparent escalation ladder?
So you have two questions. How they think in Tehran?
Why'd they do this?
And what the Americans and the Saudis should do. It's two different questions. You move me from the red side to the blue side. So let's start
You're
with...
that versatile. I want your answer to both.
Let's start with the red. The Iranians, as I explained before, felt that the maximum pressure is too dangerous, and they maybe not survive. Why the supreme leader have come in 2013 to talk with the Americans in Oman and then in Vienna? Because there is a point where the Iranian leadership think that the sanctions and the economic collapse is more danger to the regime than giving up the nuclear ambitions. And this was the supreme leader decision. Say, 2013, the regime is under a lot of pressure, the economy may collapse. Let's have an agreement with the Americans if we can have a dignified agreement that will keep a lot of capabilities. And they got a good agreement. It is not an accident that they are stick to the agreement. They are not leaving the agreement. Because the agreement, in the long run, is good for Iran. You know, when the agreement was signed in 2015, there were two approaches about it. Prime Minister Netanyahu have said that this is like 1938. He's always in Churchill time. 1938 Munich agreement. This is a surrounding, this will bring a war, this will bring a new Holocaust. He haven't said that, but this was the music. In the American administration, they said this is the best non-proliferation agreement ever reached. They haven't said it, but they say we need a second Nobel Prize for Peace. So second Holocaust, second Nobel Prize for Peace. My judgment was both of them went too far. It is not a good agreement. It's a very problematic agreement. However, there is some advantages there. Especially in the first half. In the first 10 years, the Iranians are rolled back. Instead of 19,000 centrifuges, 6,000. The only nuclear reactor is closed, shut down. 12 tons of enriched uranium are exporting to Russia. The problem is right here, in the second half of the agreement, when the Iranians get full legitimacy to a full-scale nuclear war program. Zero distance from the bomb, so you can't stop them. And this is dangerous. So my recommendation to the Prime Minister was not to go to and give a wonderful speech in the Congress, which haven't helped to anything, only to make Israel look as a Republican cause and not a bipartisan cause. And if he was smart, you know, the Arabs were smarter. They were against the agreement, but they came to Camp David to negotiate some aid to how to cope with the Iranians. Anyway, the Iranians are now looking into, they see the sanctions making basically what they have done in 2013. And they want to come to negotiation, but their trust in the Americans is less than 2013, because the Americans signed an agreement and then withdrew. So if they would have come to the negotiation in May 19, they were very weak. They didn't have any leverage. So this map that I saw, what the Iranians are doing now, in a way they are also gaining bargaining chips. Look what we can do. If there will be an agreement, we will not attack the oil. We will not produce more nuclear materials. So they try to create some bargaining chip for a future negotiation.
Can they control that escalation?
They think, as I told you, they are smart. And they put their shoes in Trump shoes. Not their shoes, in Trump's shoes. And they are saying the following. He has election. Going to war, not a good idea for a campaign time. The American people don't want to go to another war in the Middle East. I visited the World War II Museum in New Orleans. Amazing, the sacrifice of this country. But at the end, they saw a victory. The objectives were achieved. This is not the case of Afghanistan and Iraq. So the American people don't want to go. I don't need to tell you about that. The Pentagon don't want to go to another war. The Pentagon thinking that I found a little bit different from the Israeli thinking is whether it's peace or a full-scale war. So everything is now, there is unintended consequences and slippery slope. Israel in a way trying to find the art of using military power surgically to achieve the goals in a minimum cost.
Continuously.
Yeah. So the Iranians think that politically and militarily, the Americans don't want to go to war, and the interest of America is less. It is not 1991. You have a lot of oil here in Texas and everywhere. You are producing more oil than Saudi Arabia. And Saudi are not popular here because of Khashoggi and the rest of their behavior. So the president, I think, decided to do everything, maximum pressure with diplomacy, with sanctions, but not kinetically. So the Iranians feel it and they understand it. I'm not sure the global hawk was down with after a discussion.
Might have been a low-level decision.
Yeah. But they were lucky. It was unmanned airplane. I think the limit for the president is American soldiers' life. If the Iranians will attack an American installation or aircraft carrier or whatever, and people will be killed, this will be an escalation point. So they are very careful. They are very careful. And they hope that they can come to negotiation with more leverage. This is the Iranian side.
Now, you're an advisor to the Saudi royal family and/or the United States. You want to reestablish that deterrence, the trust in that security guarantee we've provided to Saudi Arabia. You want to diminish leverage if you foresee negotiations coming forward. What do you do?
First of all, I'm not advising Americans and Saudis. I'm hardly advising Israelis.
But you thought about it.
I thought about it. When the president haven't attacked after the global hawk was downed, I tweeted that it's a smart decision because he needs more legitimacy. There was no legitimacy to attack Iran hardly with some probability of going to a full-scale war. Even though I think that the Iranians will not go to full-scale war, but he needs more legitimacy. The attack on Saudi gave him legitimacy, but maybe not enough as, God forbid, an American soldier's killed. So I would recommend continuing with the maximum pressure. And if you can have under kinetic attack, which is cyber, covert, clandestine, that the Iranians will try to pay a price. And what is deterrence at the end of the day? That somebody knows that if he will attack you, the price is unacceptable for you. This should be established sooner or later, preferably by a low intensity and low signature attacks. If this cannot be reached, you have to find a target that will be strong enough to tell the Iranians enough is enough, but not such an attack that will deteriorate you to a war. I think the decision to help the Saudis to protect their country is also the right one. The Saudis have the best weapon that they bought from you. But at the end of the day, it's not the weapon itself. It's the whole system. How the intelligence telling you that somebody is going to launch missiles, how you cue your early warning radars, how you find them in the right time to tell the Patriot missiles or the F-15s that this is coming, and to intercept it in the time. The Iranians tried to attack Israel 4 times in the last 2 years. And due to a very good intelligence and very experienced and trained system, we were able to stop all these attacks. It is not guaranteed forever. Non-defense system is hermetic, but the Saudis were exposed. They look south to Yemen. The Houthis are firing missiles almost every week, and the Iranians came from the other side without intelligence warning.
Thank you, as always, for your candor. I want to now turn to the audience. If I can ask our folks with microphones, I think we've left a good bit of time here for a handful of questions. I see one of my students. There has to be some benefit to taking my class. Can we get a microphone down here? Thank you. Pardon? Yeah. Please remind General Yadlin who you are. He may recognize you from earlier this afternoon.
Thank you again, General Yadlin, for coming. My name is Connor Joyce. My question is, the U.S. administration has made pretty clear that resolving the Israel-Palestine conflict would help in their efforts to counter Iran. And you made the comment today that you think kind of the converse, that removing the Iranian regime would help solve the Palestine-Israel issue. The agreement seems to be that they are interlinked, intimately linked. My question is, why is that?
Do you want to take 3 or
Why don't we
one by
take
one?
them one at a time? Yeah, let's
Okay.
tackle that one, please.
So Iran is a spoiler to the peace process between the Israeli and the Palestinians. When the Oslo Accord was signed, 1993, the Iranians supported the terrorist group of Hamas and Islamic Jihad in their terror campaign to stop the negotiation. What basically have stopped the negotiation of Oslo, the second stage and the third stage, were buses that exploded in Israel and restaurants that exploded in Israel based on Iranian money, Iranian training. And if there will be another regime in Iran, I think the part of the Palestinians who oppose any agreement, who oppose the very existence of Israel. Hamas, when it took over Gaza, the Europeans begged them to recognize Israel, to recognize the agreement between PLO and Israel, and to denounce terror. And they refused. They refused because they knew that they will be supported by Iran. So that's why I say that if Iran regime will be a different regime, the chances for achieving Israeli-Palestinian agreement is higher. I'm not saying guarantees. There are still huge gaps. That's why I came with my plan. Say, even if there are huge gaps, let's start moving and not stand still, which is, I think, negative in all aspects.
Terrific. Next up. I'm trying to see here. Back row in the blue shirt, please. Thanks.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Jeremy. I'm actually a student at the law school right over here. You said a couple of things that made me feel cautiously optimistic about a two-state solution in the near future, the prospect of blue and white forming a coalition and potential support from the Emiratis and the Saudis. What role would Jordan play in that kind of a situation? Do you think that King Abdullah would be a source of agreement, of compromise, or do you think that the Palestinian population within Jordan would pressure him too much to not be a source of compromise?
The king of Jordan will be, in a way, the leader of such an effort. I forgot to mention his name, but he is in the same camp with the Egyptians, with the Saudis, with the UAE. Remember, he has peace with Israel. Now, one of the good and important national security pillars of Israel is that we have peace with the two countries that are most important among our neighbors. Egypt, which is the leading Arab country with 100 million people. We fought 3 wars with it, and we have now peace for 40 years. This is a dream. For me as a teenager, that we will have peace with Egypt, look like impossible. And we have peace with Jordan, which is the longest border that we share with any country. So the king of Jordan will support any peace agreement that the Palestinians will be happy with. He will also push the Palestinians to agree in his limited powers. He is not as strong as the Saudis that can support them financially, but a nightmare for the Jordanians is a one-state solution, because they're afraid that Israel will move the Palestinians to Jordan, and Jordan will be the Palestinian state. This is his nightmare. So he will support a two-state solution 100% in any configuration.
Ma'am, right here. It's coming right up behind you, this microphone.
Thank you so much for your very informative remarks. I wanted to ask about Saudi Arabia in a different way. So it's a rough neighborhood, as you said, and there are bad neighbors and worse neighbors to deal with. And one of Netanyahu's, one of the consequences of his actions, as you mentioned, was to reduce from the Israeli side a sense of bipartisanship towards the United States government, and throw in his lot very closely with President Trump, who is smitten with the current Saudi regime no matter what, it seems like. And it seems to me that the Saudi government is not very secure either in many ways, and many of the Sunni dictatorships and their repression of their Shiite and other populations, they don't seem to be a group to bank on in the long term. So clearly they didn't rise to your level of top 5 powers, but would you recommend sticking with this policy of having no pushback towards Saudi Arabia and its desires from the United States government?
Once again, I will not advise the US government. I think it is a huge responsibility to advise my own government. And concerning the Saudis, we don't have peace agreement with Saudi Arabia, unlike Jordan and Egypt. The Saudis were very much anti-Israelis. If you compare Iran and Saudi, in Iran, the leadership hates Israel. The people in the street, not necessarily. There is no real conflict between Israel and Iran, territorial or interest. It's the regime, that radical Islamic leadership. In Saudi Arabia, it's the other way around. The leadership understood that Israel strategically is important to them. The people in the street still have 70 years of indoctrination to hate Israel. But it is changing a little bit. Some Saudis visited Israel, but Israel need to do something in the Palestinian issue to move Saudi closer to Israel. And at least Prime Minister Netanyahu was not willing to do it. So everything that we're doing is under the table, is not in the open. And the Saudis, when President Obama asked them in 2009 to approve a flight of El Al airplane to India, he refused. The Saudis refused. Now they agreed that the Indians will fly. Not El Al, but the Indian airline. This is not serious. This is not something that we are happy that the Saudis are not anti-Israelis as they used to be, but they are not real allies as it could have been if Israel moved on the Palestinian issue. Once again, in the past, and this is what the Saudis are telling me, they say in the past we were 100% behind the Palestinians. Whatever they demand, we were behind them. We spoiled them. We now have different interests. We are not 100% behind them, but you have to give them something. You can't give them nothing and hope that we will align with you in the open.
Professor Suri, you don't need a microphone. You're amongst us.
My voice is already too loud. Thank you, General Yadlin, for your analysis. Your analysis was as much about Iran as it was about Israel. So maybe you can share with us your assessment of what Iran's strategic aims are. What's their end game? What are they seeking to accomplish? And what are the acceptable positions for them in a possible agreement? What would it actually look like? Not an interim agreement, but if we think about the future strategic space that we're operating in here, what do they want to accomplish realistically? And what are the areas where Israel and the United States can legitimately work with them?
The Iranians' objective is not an agreement with Israel, not at all. The last JCPOA was not with Israel. It was with the 5+1, P5+1. The Iranian objective is to be again a superpower. At the minimum, a regional superpower and maybe a global superpower. You know, there are a small number of nations that can go back 1,000 years. The Chinese, the Egyptians, maybe the Roman and the Greek, I'm not sure it's the same people, but there are, and maybe the Jews, maybe 5 nations, and the Iranians is one of them. And their pride is huge. And they think that they haven't treated well by the imperialist powers, be it UK, US, Russia, and they want to be a superpower. Now, on this national aspiration, add the religious issue. They are Islamic Republic, and they think that basically the whole Middle East belong to Islam. And any entity that is not Islamic should be wiped off the map. It's not a secret. They write it on the missiles. So the goal is to be, again, a superpower. 2 efforts to make it happen. And they are supporting each other. It's the nuclear effort, which will give an umbrella to the conventional effort to reach the Mediterranean on the land bridge that go from Iraq to Syria to Lebanon. This is how they, remember, the enemy is the Arabs. It's not so much Israel. But if you want to be the leader of the Islamic world, and Egypt lost this position, you have to be anti-Israeli by definition, more than Egypt, more than Turkey, more than the Saudis, who are competing to the position of leading the Islamic world. So Iran is not looking for any agreement with Israel. The Iranians have learned the lesson on the nuclear issue, that don't rush to the bomb. If you rush to the bomb, you're making a mistake, somebody will stop you. Reach to the bomb not as quick as possible, but as safe as possible. So they have developed a plan that will look like a civilian program, which is legitimate, and claiming that they don't have enough energy. You know, this country with a lot of oil, and the reserves of Gaza are the greatest in the world. And developing a nuclear program that they don't need unless they need it for military. What they are doing now conventionally is even more interesting because they adapt the North Korean model. They want to have 50,000 missiles that will be aimed at Tel Aviv the way the North Koreans are aiming missiles and artillery to Seoul. And why the South Korean is so hesitant? And why the Americans are so hesitant? Because they know that Seoul will be under fire and 500,000 people will be killed. This is what they want to do on the conventional arm. So these two efforts are supporting each other. Once again, the Iranians' culture is long horizon planning. We belong to the culture of planning for the next primary, for the next quarter, 6 o'clock news, next Twitter. These people are planning 5 years, 10 years, a generation ahead. And you have to be very, you have to understand them from intelligence point of view, the culture, the way they are accepting how they reach decisions. And they are not stupid. They say, okay, we have a president who is very anti-Iranian, try to overcome this time and plan for another. But the goal is to be a superpower with military and conventional powers that superpowers have. This is the goal.
We have time for just one more question, and then we'll ask General Yadlin for a short answer. Sir, in the back there, you had your hand up.
Yes. On the eve of election, the Prime Minister announced this annexation and carve-out of what seemed to be a major portion of the West Bank. Now, in this post-election period when they're putting together a government, what's the impact of that, and how will that impact the growing sentiment among Saudis, Jordanians, and others who are starting to accept Israel?
Prime Minister Netanyahu got 2 presents from your president. One was justified. It's the unification, it's the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And second, before the first election, he got recognition on the Golan Heights. He haven't annexed anything, and he haven't got the approval of your president for this annexation. It was a cheap trick of campaign that nobody took seriously. He haven't announced on annexation. Annexation should go with the Knesset resolution. Knesset should vote on it. And your president haven't supported him. The American State Department have said that nothing have changed in their policy. So there was no annexation, as there was no defense treaty between Israel and America that he announced. But the president have said, I will discuss it with you in the UN General Assembly meeting, but Bibi is not coming. So these tricks, in a way, were part of the reason that he lost some of his supporters that look at what he is doing and say, this is not a responsible leader, because it's give nothing of substance. It was a campaign, another rabbit he brought from his hat, but this magician didn't work this time. And I would not take it seriously, and the Europeans didn't take it seriously. Even the Palestinians haven't took it seriously. It's done nothing to the relation. Those who are against any settlement in Israel, in the West Bank by Israel, find another reason to attack Israel, but on the strategic level, it didn't change anything.
Thank you, General Yadlin.
My pleasure. Good to see you again.